It's no secret that housing in Canada is getting increasingly unaffordable. In the past, someone with a regular middle-income job could afford a home much more easily than nowadays, causing a lot of young people to give up on home ownership altogether. A standard house costs almost twice as much in Canada as it does in the United States. The sad thing is just that it wasn't always like this. So let's take a look at how home prices have evolved over the years and not only answer the question of how unaffordable is housing in Canada, but also how unaffordable is housing in Canada really compared to the rest of the world, including the United States. Homes in Canada are expensive, yes, but what matters most is not just the absolute dollar amount, but more importantly, how affordable are homes. On an aggregate level, home affordability can best be expressed by using an indicator called price-to-income ratio. Let's say that your annual income is $80,000. A price-to-income ratio of 4 would mean that you would need to save up 4 times your annual income in order to afford the average home. 4 times $80,000 equals $320,000. Just an example. In 1980, the price-to-income ratio was 3.2. The average home price was $67,000. Yes, unbelievable, right? And if you earned the median income, which was $21,000 at that time, you'd need to save up 3 times that to buy your home outright. And over the next 2 decades, the price-to-income ratio increased to 3.4 and 3.5, which is still hardly noticeable. In 2000, which doesn't feel too long ago, the average home price was $164,000. You'd only need 3.5 times a median income of $46,750 to buy a home. Between the years 2000 and 2010 came the real shock, with price-to-income ratios skyrocketing, reaching 5.9. If you earned a median income of $57,000, you'd now need to save up almost 6 times that much to afford the average home. This development was of course not unique just to Canada, but was felt all around the globe during the financial crisis. And unfortunately, it didn't stop there. Going on to 2020, housing affordability only became worse. The average home now cost $566,000, and with a median income of $84,000, one now needed almost 7 times that amount to buy a home. So if the news now are saying that housing prices are coming down, it's easy to misinterpret. Even though home prices are coming down a bit, it only makes a tiny difference because in the past, housing prices have already increased by so much. Home prices have increased significantly. But more importantly, the purchasing power for homes has gone down when taking into consideration Canadian income. One thing is clear, the money that you worked so hard for is continuously losing value, especially if not invested. In case you haven't started investing yet, an easy way to start doing that is using Wealthsimple. I've been using this app for over 3 years now, and I really love the easy-to-use interface, especially for beginners, and that stocks and ETF trades are commission-free. So if you want to try out Wealthsimple, you can use my referral link in the descriptions down below, and both you and I will each get a referral bonus of $25 once your account is funded. Now back to the video. So the actual problem now is not the growth of home prices, but that the growth of home prices have exceeded the growth of Canadian incomes. NerdWallet summarizes this further. In the 40 years between 1980 and 2020, the average home price increased by about 746%, while the median household income rose by 295%. But is this problem unique to Canada, or do other countries around the world exhibit the same trend as well? Let's start by looking at the growth of house prices over a period of 12 years, from 2010 to 2022. Globally, 80% of countries have seen increasing home prices. So surprisingly, yes, there are countries in which home prices have not increased at all. In advanced economies, housing prices have increased by 77% nominally and 39% on average based on real price growth. So if we take inflation into account. Iceland holds rank number 1 for housing price increase with a whopping 202% in nominal price growth, followed by Estonia, New Zealand, Chile, Turkey, and then Canada. So at 148% price growth in the last 12 years, Canada ranks pretty high on the list, ranking country number 6 worldwide with the highest increase in housing prices. Just think about it, housing prices have doubled in just a bit over a decade. And how does Canada compare to the other G7 countries?
You can kind of see again, Canada's price growth has outpaced every other country in the G7.
And as we always love to compare ourselves with our closest neighbor, the United States, the US ranks number 13, with housing prices increasing by 118% in nominal and 63% in real terms. Still a lot, but a far cry from what we're experiencing here in Canada. And that's what frustrates so many people. We are right next to each other, and yet home prices in Canada are growing much faster than in the US. If that higher growth in prices were compensated by higher incomes, well, then everything would perhaps be fine. But unfortunately, Canadian incomes lag far behind, making it much more difficult to afford a home. Canada's gap between real estate prices and incomes looks ridiculous besides US data. And this will show you how much more unaffordable homes in Canada are compared to the US. Canadian and American real estate prices versus disposable income. Let's look at the time frame between 2005 and 2021. From 2005 to 2021, home prices in Canada have increased by 139%, while US home prices have only risen by 10% in the same period. This means that Canadian home prices have grown by over 13 times in the same period. And although yes, the good news is that Canadian incomes grew faster in that time period compared to the incomes in the US, but not fast enough. As of Q2 2021, Canadian real disposable incomes increased by 46% from 2005. In the US, incomes increased by only 10% over the same period, so Canada grew faster. However, not nearly enough to justify the gap between home prices and incomes. Let's look at the chart again to let it really sink in. The red dotted line shows Canadian incomes, while the red solid line shows Canadian home prices. Home prices in Canada advanced 64% faster than disposable income. The blue dotted line shows US incomes, while the solid blue line shows US home prices. In the US, incomes advanced 16% faster than home prices, an inverse relation. So relatively to the US, it is much harder for Canadians earning a Canadian salary to buy a home in Canada. But what about other countries than the US? Are they also experiencing something similar to Canada? This chart here shows the price-to-income ratio in different countries. These ratios here measure the development of house price growth in 2022 compared to 2015 as base year. The higher the ratio, the faster the growth of house prices have outpaced the growth of income. In the Netherlands, the house price-to-income ratio was 146, making it one of the countries worldwide where house prices have risen the most in comparison to income in recent years. At least Canada is not the worst offender in this respect. But Canada is a very close runner-up. Just right after Portugal, the Netherlands, and Austria, Canada ranks number 5 globally in terms of house price outpacing earnings. And yes, the US is just right behind. Looking at Canada and the United States, we're looking at a very small subsection of the world. Surely both countries have a huge housing problem, but we've shown that housing affordability is much worse in Canada. Now, it's not all doom and gloom. What if you're already in Canada? While it's useful to know about all of these things, it's no use to just complain. On an individual level, there are a few solutions. The first one is earn more, obviously, much more. Homes in Canada will still feel ridiculously expensive compared to many other countries, but at least it will become a bit more affordable if you can catapult yourself into a higher earning bracket, into a higher net earning bracket, after taking into consideration the higher taxes that come with higher income, of course. Another option is to move out of big cities like Toronto and Vancouver, which are obviously the most expensive cities in terms of housing. And to illustrate just how much home prices differ across the country, let's take a look at this chart here and go through average prices in different markets. In 2024, the average price of a home in British Columbia was $1,018,000. In Ontario, $889,000. In Newfoundland and Labrador, $290,000. In Quebec, $511,000. In Manitoba, $362,000. In Saskatchewan, $334,500. Alberta, $491,962. In the Northwest Territories, $461,000. And in Yukon, $541,600. And if this still doesn't work for you, then perhaps consider moving to another country altogether. And if you plan to stay in Canada, the third thing that you can do is to vote in a better government that can hopefully bring about some improvements to the housing situation.